and then we'll be ready to go.
Hi, everyone. This is Frank Sinatra Jr. reminding you you're listening to my favorite DJ, Jimmy Diele. Oh, by the way, my father kind of likes him too.
Oh, there you have it, guys. That was, of course, we have Jimmy Diele here, and we have the great Tom Dreesen, comedian extraordinaire, everything. Welcome, guys.
Welcome to the show, Tom Dreesen, legendary comedian. Great to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing good, fellas. I'm doing real good. That was probably the best introduction I've ever had in my entire 51 years in show business. That was the shortest and the best introduction I've ever
had. That's great.
Tom,
you grew up on the south side of Chicago. You were one of 8 children. That was a pretty rough time for you at that point. How do you get into show business, and how do you want to become a comedian? Tell us all about that.
Well, when I was a little boy, I used to listen to you, Jimmy Diele, and I said, geez, if he can do that, I can do that. Sarah, I wasn't an unhappy childhood. I had 8 brothers and sisters. I grew up in a suburb on the south side of Chicago called Harvey, Illinois. And Harvey was a blue collar town, steel mills and factories and all over the place. We had 15 different factories. We had 36 taverns. And my dad went to every one of them almost every night, But we were very poor. We had, I had holes in my shoes, you'd stick cardboard in it. If a window broke, you stuffed a rag in it. I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner. I had a paper out. All this to help feed my brothers and sisters, and none of this do I regret.
Right.
And so that's how I grew up. I grew up, raggedy poor.
Mm-hmm.
By the time, in all the bars that I was shining shoes in Harvey as a little boy, the jukeboxes would be playing, and Frank Sinatra would be singing on all those jukeboxes. The irony of that was, years later, I was appearing on stages all over the world with Frank Sinatra. So that's what my book about. That's what my life is about. It's about a little boy shining shoes in bars on the south side of Chicago, hearing Frank Sinatra on the jukebox in Harvey, Illinois. And then years later, that little boy is carrying Frank Sinatra's coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California. So,
wow.
So that's what my story is about. Well, what happened was, when I went into service, spent 4 years in service, came out, I got married, 3 kids, struggling, wandering from job to job, not knowing what it was I was supposed to be doing in life, and feeling very unfulfilled. Every job I had, from construction to I was a photographer, I was a private detective. I worked on a loading dock. I loaded trucks. I became a Teamster. I later dropped my Teamster card and became management. And the 44 union guys that I worked with, I now was their foreman, which was another experience in itself, but never feeling fulfilled. And I joined a civic group called the JCs, the Junior Chamber of Commerce, and working on community projects on how to make the community a better place to live. But in doing so, you learn leadership training programs, how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, how to conduct meetings, Robert's Rules of Order, and how to speak in front of an audience.
Right.
And I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor, a concept I had. And helping me with that project was a young black guy named Tim Reed. And the program became such a success that one day a little 8th grade girl said, "You guys are so funny, you ought to become a comedy team." And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us, because no one had ever done that before. So that's how I got in the show business. I was a member of America's first black and white comedy team. In history shows, we were the last. There was never since. That was, we were together 6 years. And then the team split up, and I went on my own and became this, stand-up comedian that struggled, stayed on the West Coast. My wife and kids were back in Chicago. I ended up sleeping in a car, an old Nash Rambler, hitchhiking to the Comedy Store every night, begging to work for free, and then finally, the Tonight Show discovered me, and I got on the Tonight Show in my life. I never stopped working since, from all that time. I did my first appearance on the Tonight Show in December 1975. I've since done 61 appearances on the Tonight Show.
Wow.
Over 500 appearances on national television as a stand-up comedian, but all of it from that first Tonight Show. After I did that first appearance on the Tonight Show, I never stopped working.
Wow. There's Elvis and you. Was that Elvis and you, right? Elvis with Elvis and Frank Sinatra. Okay.
I've seen these pictures, right? Some of them that I'm involved in, and some of them I'm not.
Yeah. So Tom, why did the comedy team end?
Well, Tim Reed and I, again, we were America's first black and white comedy team, and America wasn't ready for us, but we were ready for America. And so we went out to there were no comedy clubs in those days.
Right.
We were what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs.
Mm-hmm.
In the North and the South. We worked the Sugar Shack in Boston, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear in Chicago, Guys and Gals in Chicago, the 20 Grand in Detroit. When Motown was in Detroit, we worked a big club there called the 20 Grand where all the Motown acts broke in their act before they went to Vegas. Then we worked the Club Harlem in Atlantic City before the gambling, which was the apex of the Chitlin Circuit. When you got to the Club Harlem, you made the big time. And that's where all the it was interesting because in nightclubs in those days, you started on a Monday, you opened on a Monday, but you closed on a Friday. I'm sorry, you closed on a Saturday night. That was your closing night. But at the Club, you opened on Saturday night, and the first show was 10 o'clock in the morning. Second show was 2 o'clock in the morning. The third show was 6 a.m. Sunday morning, what they call the breakfast show.
Oh, wow.
1,300 people would come down there, all the waiters and the waitresses, night people, bartenders, but also all the pimps and their hoes, from Newark, from Philadelphia, from Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan. The pimps brought all their ladies down there, and the place was packed. And 5 acts on the bill, and it would be Mama Lou Parks and her dancers, a heavyset black woman with all these dancers that did the dances of the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and just get the room rocking. And then there'd be a male singing group, and then a female singing group, and then it would be the comedy. And then it would be like Smokey Robinson or the OJs or the Temptations or whatever. And Tim and I were the comedy team, that would open just before the headlines. But it was an amazing experience. And then we later worked the Playboy circuit. We worked around. We got an album out, but America just wasn't ready for us. And Tim wanted to be more of an actor, and I understand comedy. And Tim Reed went on to become Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati. He went on to become on a show called Simon and Simon, a sitcom, another series. He was on maybe 15 series. He also was on a show called Sister. He played the father. Tim Reed is and he's a producer, a director, and my dearest friend to this day. Everything I have, everything I own, everything I become is because Tim Reed and I started out together. We're the best of friends today.
Tell us about the Comedy Store. How was it working at the Comedy Store?
When 1975, when the comedy team split up, wherever you went in America in 1975, people say, "What do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." The next question out of their mouth was, "Oh yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? If you ever been on Johnny Carson in America, you just weren't a comedian. You might want to be one. You might going to be one. You weren't one now." So Johnny Carson moved out of New York in 1972 into the West Coast. Now, and all of a sudden, one appearance on the Tonight Show, your life changed. Freddie Prinze did one appearance, you got a sitcom the next day. So all the comedians began to migrate to the West Coast to get near the Carson Show. There was only one game in town at that time, the Comedy Store. The improvisation wasn't there. The Laugh Factory wasn't there at that time. So when you got up to the West Coast, you had to get on at the Comedy Store. And the audition for the Comedy Store might be more pressure than your first appearance on the Tonight Show. Because if Mitzi didn't like you, Mitzi Shore, who owned the Comedy Store, if she didn't like you, it's back to Toledo, Ohio, pal, or it's back to Harvey, Illinois, because if she didn't like you, there was no place that you could get launched at. The comedy became the rock and roll of the 70s. The Comedy Store the excitement was hard to describe. Every night, the talent coordinators from all these shows would come in there, and also for sitcoms, looking for new acts, looking for, comedians. The Canada, that several TV shows, they sent their coordinators down there to look for these new comedians and send them up there. I did one appearance on the Tonight Show, and the next day, as I said, my whole life changed. All of a sudden, I was now being asked to do Dinah Shore, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson, Midnight Special, rock concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. I did the $20,000 Pyramid, Hollywood Squares. One appearance on the Tonight Show, bang, I was on my way. Sammy Davis Jr. took me on the road for 3 years. That's how powerful that show is. So the Comedy Store every night, somebody would be getting discovered. Every night, some comedian say, "I'm doing the Merv Griffin show. They want me up in Canada." Dinah Shore people just booked me on the show. Every night, it was some excitement going on there, and I was on stage every night with all these unknown comedians: David Letterman, Jay Leno, Robin Williams, Gallagher, Michael Keaton. The girl waiting tables was Deborah Winger.
Right.
This is, and they were all unknowns at the time, and it was just the most exciting time to be on the West Coast.
You had a great relationship with David Letterman as well, right? It was way before the Comedy Store, right?
Well, when the first night he came out to the West Coast with his red pickup truck, he was in the parking lot. I came off stage. He had seen my set, and he said to me, "I really enjoyed your set, Mr. Threesen." And I said, but I immediately, because I'm an outgoing human being, I said, I'm very extrovert. I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Indianapolis." And I started talking sports. "Gee, what major league team did you root for growing up in Indianapolis?" Baseball. I'm talking sports. I'm a big sports fan. And we became and friends to this day. We talk to each other, at least once a week. But I'll tell you something funny. The other day he said to me, he said, "Tom, I ended up doing 50 appearances on David's show, and I even hosted a show when David had the shingles, and when David wasn't feeling good, I could host. So every time I saw David, I'd say, 'You don't look so hot. You need to take some time off,' But
right.
But I'll tell you a funny story. He calls me a while back and he says, 'Tom, every time you go on an interview or I go on an interview and people ask how we met, we always tell the same story, that you were on stage at the Comedy Store, you came off and I saw you in the parking lot, and we became friends, So I said, yeah. He said, "Well, it's a boring story." I said, "Well, but that's what happened." He said, "I don't care if it's boring. From now on, tell people that you were on stage, you came off stage, I was in the parking lot, and I had stole some material from you, and you beat the hell out of me." I said, "Dave, I don't want to tell that story." He said, "It's a better story." I said, "Why would I tell that story?" I said, "You got 32 million fans who'll be chasing me through airports." He said, "It's a better story." Now, 2 weeks go by, and he calls me. He said, "Hey, you know the governor of Illinois?" I said, "I met him, but I don't know him." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well," and he told me a problem he was having, a very nice thing that he wanted to help some autistic adults out with. And the government was holding back that project. And I said, "I know who the president of the Senate is. John Cullerton is a good friend of mine in Illinois." And I said, "I'll call him." I call him. I tell him David's problem. He said, "So tell David we're taking care of that. We're taking care of that." And he started explaining to me the statute and stuff. I said, "Hey, could Dave call you and you explain it to him because you explained it better?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Oh, do me a favor. When Dave calls you, tell David that you're helping him. And the reason you're helping him is because Dreesen beat the hell out of you in the parking lot at the Comedy." He said, "Okay." Now 10 minutes go by, my phone rings. I said, "It's Letterman." I said, "Hello." He said, "Didn't I tell you that's a better story? I told you that's a better story." He wants me to tell the world.
Doc G, you have something for Tom?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, since you've been on the Tonight Show so many times, did you meet any other comedians like Don Rickles? Did you run back and forth with him, Don Rickles?
Rickles, I worked for years. I did the Dean Martin roast,
Right.
And
I remember you on them.
Yeah, and Rickles, every time when I'd go to Vegas, I'd go see a show, and he always, because I used to do a lot of material about going to Catholic school. So Rickles, when he ever introduced a celebrity, he's going to roast you. Rickles would say, "We got a comedian in the audience. Where's he at? Tommy Dreesen, Tommy." And Rickles would take a glass of water and put his fingers in it and start throwing water. He'd throw water on it. And Don, and in those days, it's interesting. In those days, there weren't a lot of comedians. There were a lot, but there weren't like there are today. In those days, on another basis, people say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." They go, wow, Martha, honey, come here. Honey, he's a stand-up comedian. You know what they say today? They say, "What do you do?" You say, "I'm a stand-up comedian." Yeah, so is my dentist. My dentist is a stand-up comedian too. You know, my wife's gynecologist does stand-up too. Yeah,
You're right. You're right.
everybody's a stand-up comedian today.
You're right.
Well, we had a question from a listener, Tom, who wants to know: did you have any comedy influences growing up?
Yeah, you know, the comedians that when I wanted to be a comedian, there was two I liked. Richard Pryor, who I became very good friends with, because I grew up in a neighborhood like Richard. So when he was doing stand-up, I thought he was talking to my soul. I mean, he was reminding me of every street corner I was ever on.
Right.
I grew up in a predominantly black area, and so Richard spoke from, you know, from where I came from. But another comedian named Jack Benny, who was much older, I was always a fan of Jack Benny's. Jack Benny, because he made comedy look easy. I've always said a person is an artist in any endeavor when they make their work look, one word, effortless. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy. You will be my music. You will be my song. You say, I can do that. No, you can't. He just made it look like you could. You know,
Wow.
Jack Benny made comedy look easy. Jack Benny he made it look easy. And it isn't easy. But I thought, wow, I want to be that kind of kid. I want to walk out on stage every night and make it like everybody's in my living room and this is my house. And you've all come to my home and I want to talk to you. Make it look like a conversation, not a presentation.
Right.
It's your act. You damn right it's your act. It's your job to make it look like it's not your act. It's just a conversation. And Benny did it that way. And so did Richard. Richard just off the top of his head kind of stuff, you know. Those two were
Wow.
influenced.
Talking about, you mentioned stealing jokes. You had a little incident with Robin Williams when you first met him, right? Didn't he borrow people's jokes at one point? You mentioned in your book.
Well, you know what happened was Robin. I had done a couple of Tonight shows, and then they booked me at the Newport Laugh Stop. A guy named Michael Kelly booked me there, and my opening acts were a comedy team called Roger and Roger, another a comedian with a dummy, Willie Tyler in Leicester, a black fellow who had a dummy called Lester, and a new kid named Robin Williams. And when he said Robin Williams, I'm thinking it was a girl. I said, Robin, what does she do? He said, oh, Tom, it's a kid from San Francisco, and he's really funny. And the first time I saw Robin, he blew me away. He was so out there, so funny. And we became friends, and Robin and I were friends till he died. But what happened was when he had the show Mork and Mindy, at the end of that show, every night, he would do a monologue to Ork, to somebody out in outer space, right? And one did one of my jokes, and my phone's ringing off the hook. And so, hey, Robin did one of your jokes on it. And so now I go over to the comedy store a couple of nights later, and Robin's in the back doing improvs. And I went to go back there, and a security guard they just put on duty there tried to hold me back from going back there. And him and I had words, and I was arguing. We got real tense there for a moment. And then I went back and talked to Robin, and I wasn't mad at Robin, but I said, Robin, you know, you did that joke. And he said, oh, Tommy, I'm so sorry. He said, I'll buy the joke. I said, no, I don't want to buy it. I don't want to you to pay me anything. I just can't do it now. But I wanted to remind you that you did that. And so, but they turned it into the National Enquirer. Someone got a hold of it and turned it into that me and Robin had a confrontation. And I would never have a confrontation with Robin. First of all, he was the sweetest, kindest, most gentle soul I ever met in my life. He didn't have a bad bone in his body, a mean word to say about anybody, anytime. He was just the sweetest guy, and I would no more fight Robin. Now, the security guard and I, we might have went around the corner, you know.
Hey, Tom, do comics generally do that, though? Do they exchange jokes? They say, maybe you can try this one and you'll do it better, better delivery, better timing. How's that work sometimes?
In the old days, maybe not in our day. You know, my day, these jokes were like your children. And if somebody stole a piece of material of yours and went on national television, then they sort of owned it. So we were all protective of one another. Even the head talent coordinator of the Tonight Show, Craig Tennis, if you auditioned for him and you did a joke that he thought was somebody else's, he would tell you that. So, but you can't copyright jokes. So every time you did the Tonight Show, you had to do a brand new 6 minutes. So I did, as I told you, 61 appearances on the Tonight Show. So I was always coming up with new material. So I would go on the Tonight Show and do it. It would go on at 11 o'clock that night in most places. In the morning, disc jockeys were doing my joke, disc jockeys across the country. There were a lot of time writers would write your material down and sell it to a disc jockey in Spokane, Washington, in Miamisburg, Ohio, or wherever, so you couldn't protect the material. But what I did, and David Letterman did, and Jay Leno, we were all friends. George Miller. If there was a piece of material that if I was watching their set, and I'd say, oh, hey, when they came off stage, I'd say, the better way you can punch that joke, and I would write a joke for them, or they do that for me. Sometimes there's material that wasn't right for me, but it'd be good for Letterman, or Letterman would see something that I was doing, and we would gladly share one another, or Jay or George Miller, Sure.
That's awesome.
Help
You opened for so many acts like Natalie Cole, Tony Orlando. Tell us what it was like to open for Sammy Davis Jr. At one time, didn't he actually open for you in a way when you first opened at Caesar's Palace?
Well, you're right. I toured when I first started doing the Tonight Show. By the way, those acts you mentioned. The reason why Gladys, I was opening for Gladys Snyder Pips, Natalie Cole, Tony Orlando and Don, Mac Davis, Lola Falana, Smokey Robinson. I can go on and on and on, because they had family audiences, and they wanted a comedian that didn't work use foul language or sexual implications and stuff like that. They wanted you to set them up and not get an audience angry, So I was getting offered all these gigs, and stuff. Now Sammy, when I toured with Sammy, we went around the country. I opened for Sammy in theaters and around everywhere. But when we went to Las Vegas for the first time that I was working there, it was at Caesar's Palace with Sammy. Well, in those days, first of all, Caesar's Palace is the hardest room in show business to work. It was a death trap in those days because they serve food. It had a high ceiling. You never want to. Every comedian wants a low ceiling. I love working the Desert Inn or the Sands or the Riviera or the Golden Nugget. They had low ceilings. The audience laughter is sound. It hits a ceiling and comes at you, so it fills the room, and you set your timing off of their laughter. So you like an intimate setting for comedy. Caesar's had a high ceiling. The sound went up and you could out here. And they serve food. Waiters and waitresses running in and out. You die like a dog. And now Sammy, when I first went there with Sammy at rehearsal, the guy, Nat Brandywine, was the entertainment director. He said, Tommy, you'll do 20 minutes. Sammy does an hour and 10. We do 90-minute shows here. Sammy said, no, Nat, it's Tommy's first time here, and he's got to score. All the critics will be in the audience. And if Tommy scores, he'll be invited back here to Las Vegas. He said, I'll do 3 or 4 songs. And that way I'll set them up. And then by that time, the waiters and waitresses will be out of the room. And then I'll bring Tommy out. Tommy can do his set. Tommy, do as long as you want to. You feel you got him. And then, I'll come out and I'll finish the rest of the show. Well, when Sammy Davis Jr. went out first, those waiters and waitresses' job was to get the food done before the headliner comes. When they saw Sammy come out, they were taking food away from people who hadn't even finished eating yet. They were just clearing the room. By the 4th song, Sammy had him in the palm of his hand. And then he'd say every night, he'd say, folks, you've been wonderful to me through the years. I think of my audience as a family. He said, and you've been so good to me in my good times and bad times. So when somebody's good to you like that, you want to do something for them, like bring them a gift. I've got a gift for you. I saw this young guy, blah, blah, blah. And he said, welcome. It's his first time in Las Vegas. Welcome, Tom. He said, now I'd walk out and the audience was already, Sammy had him up on top. I'd say, I always dreamed that one day I would work Las Vegas, and I dreamed it would be Caesar's Palace. But I never dreamed that Sammy Davis Jr. would be my opening act. Now, Sammy would laugh and the audience would laugh, But what a great gift that he did for me there. And I got great reviews. And I've been working Las Vegas since 1975.
How do you feel about how Vegas changed over the years?
I miss the old days, because in those days with Sammy, by the way, I said 1975, 1977 was the first year I worked Las Vegas at Caesars. But in those days, when you worked Las Vegas, after we did our shows, we would go all up and down the strip, going to the lounges, watching, all the lounge acts, Treniers, Louis Prima, Keely Smith, and that's what we did when I toured with Frank, when I toured with Sammy, Smokey, whatever, you'd go to the lounge acts and stay up till dawn, and even the people who came to Vegas, if you were in Vegas for 5 days, you went to 5 different shows. You would leave one show and go to another show at the Riviera, at the Sands, at the Desert Inn. And the artists in those days, Sammy, Frank and Dean, or whoever, Tom Jones or Engelbert, they would say, hey, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. Make sure you go see my buddy down the street, Frank Sinatra or whoever it was. They would encourage you to go to other hotels. Today, corporate America owns Las Vegas today. the corporate America, they build those hotels so you can't leave them. You could spend a week in one hotel, and they'd have an Italian restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, a French restaurant, a steakhouse. Then they got shopping centers. And by the time you finish seeing everything in that hotel, there's a catwalk to take you to another hotel that they own also. So you end up going there and never leaving that one area. That's what I miss the most. The old days I liked a little bit better. See, when the wise guys ran Las Vegas, all they cared about was the drop in the pit. How much money was gambled last night. That's all they cared about. You want a comp room? You got a comp room. Want to see the show? You go see the show. How much money was in the pit last night? When Frank Sinatra threw the biggest high rollers from all over the world. No one matched what Frank Sinatra did in Las Vegas. No one. Tom Jones or Engelbert Humperdinck or whoever, give me. You could have 5,000 of those fans. If I own a hotel, give me 500 Frank Sinatra fans. The money was gambled was, One night in Atlantic City, a guy, when we were working with Frank, we were there 7 days. One night, one real estate guy lost $750,000 one night, $850,000 the next night, $1.5 million. One guy, a guy named Danny Schwartz. It's in the Guinness Book of Records at the Golden Nugget. Danny Schwartz,
wow,
$5 million in one night. One Sinatra fan. So they should have built them. He not only made those hotels rich, the hotels around them, because that hotel would sell out and people would, want to go there. So that's what it was like in the old days. It was the drop in the pit, how much money was gambled. When the corporations came in, every square inch had to show a profit. All the gift shop had to show a profit. The coffee shop had to show a profit. And that's what corporate America was about. And again, it was different in the old days.
Tell us about meeting Frank Sinatra and becoming his opening act. How did that come about?
By the way, Tom is asking about Foster Brooks, and I will answer that. I see the question on there. And Tom,
good.
I'll answer that for you, and then I'll talk to you how I met Frank. Foster Brooks, as you know, did this character that was a drunk, and today he would be politically incorrect. They would run him out of town on a rail, but he would do this guy that was just had way too much to drink. And I did the Dean Martin roast with Foster. One time, we were all coming back. There was an airline called Republic Airline that flew into Burbank out of Las Vegas. And so 4 of us that were on the Dean Martin roast were coming back. And they put us in first class lounge, and they boarded the plane, and they had coach the curtain shut off. And then there was 4 of us sitting in first class. So we boarded the plane, and before they took off, the pilot was talking to us. Oh, you guys are doing the Dean Martin roast. How's Dean doing? And Foster said, could I talk to the people in the back? And he said, sure. They gave him the microphone. Now, the people in the back didn't know who it was because they had the curtain closed. So Foster said, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. And it sounds like he's drunk. This is your captain speaking. I'm going to try to get this big thing off the ground. Fasten your seatbelts. People are going, oh my God, you're screaming and everything. And finally, Foster opened up the curtain and waved at him, and of course, they all started laughing. Yeah, he was a funny guy, a real funny guy. Oh, and the answer to how I met Frank Sinatra. I toured with Sammy for years and different people. And I'm touring with Smokey Robinson, and we're doing shows all around the country. And we're working in Lake Tahoe at Caesars. And Frank Sinatra was appearing next door at Harrah's. And I had worked Harrah's Hotel many times with Sammy and different artists. So I decided, of all nights, that I was there with Smokey for 7 nights at Caesars. For some reason, I chose the particular night, a Wednesday night. I said, I'm going to go over and see Frank's show. And that night, I called the Harris, and I told him, the maitre d' I was coming over. He said, Tommy, we'll set you up in a booth. Don't worry about it. So I came off stage. I didn't even change out of my stage clothes, and I rushed over to Harris Hotel, which is 2 doors away from Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And I'm running in the showroom because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. I had seen him perform, and I knew it was going to be, I knew when he walked out, the crowd went wild. So I didn't want to miss that. As I'm running into the showroom, the vice president of Harrah's Hotel, a man named Holmes Hendrickson, who was the vice president of Harrah's, and a very powerful guy. And he was talking to a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And when he saw me, he said, "Tommy, come here." And I reluctantly went over there because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. He said, "Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin." Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer. Again, a powerful guy. He said, "Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra." And the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he'd heard this a million times. And he winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink. And he said to me, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? I said, "Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000? He started laughing. He said, "Oh, I like this kid. It is a funny guy." And a week later, they gave me 1 week with Frank at the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City. And the second night I was with Frank, I can remember like it was yesterday. We were at dinner. He took me out to dinner, him and his wife, Barbara. And in the middle of dinner, he set down his knife and his fork and he said, "I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few other dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." I said, "Yeah." And it turned into 14 years, 45, 50 cities a year, a great friendship. I was a pallbearer at his funeral. I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life.
Now, you often stayed at his compound too in Rancho Mirage, right outside of Palm Springs. Tell me what that was like. I've actually been to the house. It's a beautiful compound he had there. Tell us what it was like to hang out there.
I'm going to go. And Jim Rose, in answer to who my favorite Canadian comedians are, of course, Jim Carrey. I mean, Jim Carrey came from Canada, and he always knocked my socks off. Jimmy Carrey's an incredibly funny guy, and brilliant in so many ways, So I would have to pick him out, I mean, there's many. I mean, I used to perform up in Canada, and so there's a lot of great comedians that came out of Canada. But now going back to Frank Sinatra's compound. After touring with him about 6 months, he said, "I want you to come and spend the weekend with me in his compound." And because what we would do, to digress a minute, I live in Sherman Oaks, California. Frank lived in Palm Springs area, Rancho Mirage. The jet that he had was here in Sherman Oaks in Van Nuys Airport. So when he was going on the road, the limousine would pick me up, take me right to the jet, and I would fly the jet down to Palm Springs, and we would take off from there. Or I'd stay at his home. But so I went to his compound, and I had never seen anything like this in my life. Keep in mind that I'm a kid who lived in a shack. At one time we had a huge bed that 5 of us slept in one bed. Raggedy poor kid. Now put me in this compound, this big compound that you got a big security gate. And when you come in, it was another world. There was a main house where Frank stayed, swimming pool, tennis courts. They had one little house with over $2 million worth of electric trains that Frank would go in and operate the trains going from East Coast to West Coast. But all along the wall was every train that was ever made in the world that they made it electric. They were all in little shelves, every train there ever was. And Frank would operate these trains, and that's one room. There's another place where they had a boxcar where somebody would cut your hair, and they had a massage table if you want that. On the outer perimeters of the compound were all these bungalows called New York, New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, My Way, named after his son. His house guests, my first time I go down there, his house guests were Gregory Peck and his wife Veronique, Kirk Douglas and his wife Ann, Sidney Poitier and his wife Joanne, Jack Lemmon and his wife Felicia, Robert Wagner and Jill St. John, Angie Dickinson. Wow. These are people I saw in the movies when I was a little boy in Harvey, and now I'm there, the ambassador from Italy, and these people. The first night they had a cocktail party, I'm looking around. I said, "Wow, these." I was like in Harvey, Illinois, at the Harvey Theater. These are people I saw in the movies, but they were not pretentious people, not like the people in Hollywood today do 2 appearances on a sitcom and they want limousines and red carpet rolled out from them, and they think that they can discuss foreign affairs. They know more about foreign affairs after doing 2 sitcoms than Condoleezza Rice. They're just so full of themselves and so full of something else. I find them boring. I never was a Hollywood fan. My friends and show business were mostly street guys like me that grew up on the streets. Frankie Avalon and Jimmy Darren from South Philadelphia, Frankie Valli and Joe Pesci from New Jersey, Dennis Farina from Chicago, Joe Mantegna, Dennis Franz from Chicago. We all got together all the time and go to a little Italian restaurant and just we were neighborhood guys. and they weren't full of themselves. And the same way with Frank's guests, they were more interested in you. You're a stand-up comedian. Tell me about that. Tell me, I wanted to ask Gregory Peck about To Kill a Mockingbird. I want to talk to Spartacus, but they didn't want it to be about them. It was just another world that I had never thought I'd ever be into, with this rarefied air, with all these wonderful people, and I stayed down there, for years. I'd go down there 5-6 times a year, even when we weren't working. And Frank hung out till dawn. He never went to bed till the sun came up, whether we were on the road or off the road. So some nights I'd go to the bungalow. He'd wake me up at 3:30 in the morning. Come on, Tommy, let's take a ride. We'd go right around the desert till the sun came up and talk to this. And some nights when we were all alone, just him and I in that car driving around, I was a kid from Hartford, Illinois, and he was a kid from Hoboken. And that's how we talked. He told me about his childhood and what it was like growing up in Hoboken and his, first years singing and all that. It was really fascinating to be with him.
Didn't he have that old station wagon?
Well, he had a lot of cars, but
he used to go on that.
Yeah, Lee Iacocca had given him a station wagon, a Chrysler station wagon. My first time there at this cocktail party, and the next day we had a brunch, and all these stars were there at this brunch. And I'm the new guy in the block, so I'm standing back. And Frank said, "I'm going to take the ambassador from Italy to the airport. Him and his wife. Who wants to ride with me?" And in seconds, that room was empty. I said, "Frank, I'll go with you." He said, "Okay, let's go, Tommy." We go outside, and he gets a station wagon that Lee Iacocca gave him. He said, "Tommy, you ride in the back with the ambassador's wife, and they're going to take him to the private jet in Palm Springs." I said, "Okay." I get in the back with this little Italian lady, and she nods at me, and I nod at her. And we're going to pull out the security gate, and the security's officer's job was, he opens the gate, he walks out, holds you where you're at, walks out, looks up and down the street, which is Frank Sinatra Boulevard, they call it. He looks left and right. And when it's clear, he waves you out. Well, he opened the gate, took one step, and Frank drove right by him out into the street. And cars slamming on the brake. Sideways cars. Now, her eyes get this big, and me too now. And holy cow. Now, Frank, every stop sign he came to, he'd go into the intersection. Now, by the third light, she's got her rosary out. She's saying the rosary, and Frank wanted to go from the right lane to the left lane. He went. He didn't. No signal. That's for other people. He went to one lane to that. Now, by the time we get to the airport, he's cutting people off. We pull out onto the tarmac.
Oh my God!
They get out of the car. By the fourth stoplight, I realized why I was the only one in that room. I realized why I was the only one standing there when he said, "Who wants to go to the airport with me?" Because all those other people knew he was the world's worst driver. And he was the world's worst driver when he was 21. People told me when he was a kid, he was a bad guy. When he was 65, oh my God, he just was all over the place. So now we get out at the tarmac to let them out. And the ambassador's wife, she's a little Italian lady, she comes up to me and she said, "Do you have to ride a back with him?" And I said, "Yes." And she took her thumb and she made the sign of the cross. I'm like, now we go back. And he's doing the same thing. He's talking, and Tom, when I was with the Count Basie and the Count Basie band, when we worked Vegas, that was the best. And he's talking, and all of a sudden he goes from the outside lane to the inside lane, and a guy slammed on his brakes and went up the island structure in the desert. They have the center divide. And now I said to myself, "Oh my God, he just cut that guy off." Now the guy's up. Now I'm looking at the back. No, Frank's oblivious. So he's driving, and Tommy this, and now pretty soon this guy pulls alongside of me, right? Guy gets alongside on the passenger side, and he's cursing. "You son of a bitch." I go, maybe he's driving, and the guy goes, "Sinatra, right, Sinatra?" And yeah, he goes, he can hardly wait to go home and tell his wife, "Guess who damn near killed me, honey? Frank Sinatra damn near killed me." But I get back to the compound and everybody's, all the stars are there. And Robert Wagner said to me, "Did you enjoy the drive to the airport?" I said, "Hey, you ain't going to believe." He said, "You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me. We've all been there."
Wow. You got something, Gene, for Tom?
Hey, Tom, I wanted to ask you, you're looking like you're in good shape. What are you doing these days to stay healthy?
Well, I've always been very athletic. And when I was a kid, I played a lot of sports. When I was in the service, I played sports. When I came out of the service, I played softball 4 or 5 nights a week in Chicago. Then when I came out here to the West Coast, I played in a basketball league till I was 48 years old. I played in a fast pitch softball league till I was 58 years old. I played the field. I jogged. I ran 3 marathons. And my sister Darlene had multiple sclerosis, God rest her soul. And every year I'd run 26 miles and call it 26 miles for Darlene. And people would pledge money for every mile I run. I'd bring celebrities in from Hollywood, and they'd run part of the way with me, a mile or 2 miles or a block. Smokey Robinson's the only one who ran all 26 miles with me. So I stayed in shape. But somebody once said to me, how do you always stay thin? I said, I found the secret of staying thin all your life. And they said, what's that? I said, you have to have parents who were thin all their lives,
Very true.
but I don't know. I try to stay in shape, but I try to eat proper, but I got this sweet tooth that I love cake and ice cream, all that stuff, cookies and cake and ice cream. But I play golf.
Didn't Frank do a PSA for MS for you and your sister?
It was a beautiful thing. One year we were in Chicago working Chicago theater, and every year I was running this 26 miles. And we were having dinner at a place called Gibson Steakhouse in Chicago, and a couple came up to the table while Frank and I were eating. We had some other people at the table too. And this man and woman, young guy and young wife, said, Mr. Dreesen, we run in your event every year for Darlene, and we want you to know that we really enjoy it. Thank you so much. And I said, you're welcome. When they went away, Frank said to me, what was that all about? I said, well, my sister has MS, and every year I run 26 miles. And I said, Frank, I'm joking. I said, celebrities come and help me. I said, Frank, you should run 26 miles with me. He said, are you kidding me? I couldn't do 26 steps with you, I said, okay. So now, but he said, but you know what I could do? And he started doodling on a napkin. And he said, I ride a stationary bike. And sure enough, he did a PSA, a public service announcement, riding the stationary bike while I was jogging alongside of him. And he was telling me, my good friend Tom Dreesen runs 26 miles for his sister every year. And make sure you come out. And I'm running. And finally, I'm running. I said, Frank, are you going to run with me? He said, are you kidding me? I can't even ride this thing, I couldn't, So, but he did that out of the kindness of his heart. That's a side of Frank Sinatra that a lot of people didn't know, but he was, if you were his friend, there was nothing he wouldn't do for you.
You tell a great story in your book about a Frank Sinatra at the Waldorf Astoria coming out, and there's a woman waiting outside who wants to get an autograph for her sick husband. Could you tell us about that?
But Jimmy, first let me compliment you. You read the book. I mean,
I did. I couldn't put it down. It's a great book.
Oh,
well, awesome. Thank you very much. But I've hosted shows like you're doing now, and I always made it a point. If an author was coming out, I was going to read that book. Sometimes I'd sit till 4 a.m, and sometimes it wasn't the kind of book that was easy to read. But I didn't want to interview somebody that didn't read the book, and I compliment you. That's very nice of you.
Thank you.
In answer to your question,
great story. I love this story.
Well, it gives you a real good insight to what Frank Sinatra was really all about. We were going to do a gig, and we stayed at the Waldorf Astoria in New York, and he had an apartment in the back. So we would always go out the back, because if he went out the front, he'd get mobbed, So they had the limo waiting for us, and the security was going to rush us to the limo. So we were going out the back door, and a woman had been hiding in the doorway. The doorman told me she'd been hiding for 5 hours, waiting for Frank to come up. As we were being rushed to the limo, she started screaming, Mr. Sinatra, please, Mr. Sinatra. And she started running toward him, and security stopped her. And we were getting in the car, and she kept yelling, please, Mr. Sinatra, please, And so I'm telling a story about Frank Sinatra, and you're showing Tim and Tom on the screen there. That makes sense. Anyhow, so Frank finally came back out of the limo, and he went up to her, he said, what is it? And security's holding her back. And she said, Mr. Sinatra, my husband is very, very ill, and he's home, and he's very ill. If you could sign an autograph to him, it would mean the world to him. Frank said, sure. And he's signing the autograph, and she said, oh, what beautiful cufflinks. And they were $2,000 cufflinks. I know where he got them at. They were really expensive cufflinks. And he said, thank you very much. He finished the autograph, and he took the cufflinks off, and he handed them to her and said, give these to your husband. She said, oh, no, I don't want them. I just was admiring them. And he said, no, I want your husband to have them. He said, thank you so much. Now we get in the limo, and I said, Frank, that was beautiful. But why did you do that? He said, Tommy, if you possess something, that you can't give away, then you don't possess it. It possesses you. I said,
What
whoa,
a great
wow.
story.
And he said to me later, he said, it's okay if somebody says, gee, I like your Mercedes-Benz, and you don't give it to them. But when you're looking in the mirror, when you're shaving, looking in the mirror to that guy in the mirror, you got to admit that that car owns you, because you can't give it away. If you can't give it away, it owns you. He said, Tommy, Aristotle Onassis had billions of dollars, had yachts, had private jets. The second he died, it transferred. He said, nothing you have is yours. You're only using it. The second you die, that shirt you have on will go to somebody else tomorrow. You're only using it. And by the way, he didn't only talk that talk, he walked that talk. You know, you had to be very careful. If you're his friend, you had to be very careful around Frank Sinatra to say, gee, what a beautiful watch. He'd take it off and give it to you. You couldn't say, what a beautiful painting. He'd take it off the wall and hand it to you. His friends had to be very careful about him.
He didn't always take kindly to a lot of comedians, but he did you, Tom, right? He always was very gracious to you and loved you.
I really appreciate that. But, you know, I did the job that he wanted done. He wanted a comedian that could keep coming up with the material, because we went to the same cities every year. And he took the show very serious. You want to party with him, he'll party with you all night long. But showtime, make sure that everybody knows their job, because he knew his. We didn't slough off the show. The musicians, the comedian, you better know your job, you know, because he knew his. And he knew what he expected you to get that audience up. And he expected you not to work blue, not to say one dirty word, not one. You know, off stage, he was a guy like me, a street guy. You know, you want to, you know, I can do a stag roast with the best of them, you know, but not for his audience. He didn't appreciate that at all. And you know, and I love, you know, when he first started working for him, he was the boss. This is Frank Sinatra, the great Frank Sinatra. He ran the tour. Later, he became like a buddy. We started hanging out the wee hours, and toward the end of his life, he was more like a father to me, giving me advice. And like I say, he gave me such great advice so many times. You know.
We have a question from Gene. He's actually a friend of mine, and he said that the very last time you had dinner with Frank Sinatra, a special moment happened. Could you tell us about that?
You know, yeah, thank you very much. At his 82nd birthday, he died 5 months later. His 82nd birthday, I was over the house, and they had a lot of house guests. Again, Gregory Peck and his wife, and all these stars. And we were waiting for the cake to come out. We had dinner, and Frank wasn't well. He died 5 months later. He wasn't well in those days, and sometimes you didn't know if he's quite with us. Not that he had Alzheimer's, but he sometimes would just get alone by himself. And he was often off to the side, and the woman Vine, that a black woman that took care of him for years, she was helping him eat, get some food in front of him, and he was just quiet over there. And we were making small talk, waiting for the cake to come out. And somebody said, "Where's the best place to live?" And Gregory Peck said, "Veronique and I, his wife and I, we have a home in France, a villa in France, and we like it there." Robert Wagner and Joe St. John said, "We have a place in Aspen, and we like it there." And Frank, over to the side with his head down, put his head down and said, "The best place to live is where your friends are."
Wow.
And everybody said, wow, of course that's right. My point of this, here's a guy, arguably the greatest career show business has ever known. Academy Awards, Grammys, you know, done it all, amassed a fortune, done it all. But in the end, it wasn't about any of those things. It was about relationships. The best place to live is where your friends are.
Wow. Your mom had a plaque up in the house, right? It said your talent is God's gift to you, and what you do with your talent is your gift to God. What a beautiful thing. And you use that in such a special way.
Yeah, with Frank, you know, that was one of the things that when he'd get an award or something like that. But the last performance that he ever did, I performed, and then he did 6 songs after me. It was a charity. And actually he was supposed to do 3 songs. That's all, just for this charity. But he kept getting standing ovation after standing ovation after standing ovation. And he kept going till they only brought 6. Frank Jr. was conducting, and he only brought 6 songs. You know, they didn't think they were going to sing 3, but 3. But anyhow, the last song he ever sang for your trivia friend is "The Best Is Yet to Come." And that's on his tombstone. "The Best Is Yet to Come," Francis Albert Sinatra. But that's the last song he ever sang. The best is to come and want it. Anyhow, but so that night I talked about this incredible man. 1,431 times he went to the studios. He recorded over 100 albums. He had 1,200 original songs written, 1,200 original songs. You know, all these awards, you know, that he won. He, director, won the Academy Award, never took an acting lesson, you know. But more than that, you know, more than that, this guy raised over $1 billion for charities. He sang his songs, and the money they raised were built, and he's not Jewish. He sang his songs, and Protestant orphanages were built, and he's not Protestant. He sang his songs, and thousands of African-American children went to college, and he's not African-American. Wow. If it's true that the talent you have is God's gift to you, but what you do with that talent is your gift to God, then I know no one in my business that did more for their God than Frank Sinatra.
And how important is prayer, especially in your career? I know it's very important.
Well, you know, I went to Catholic school where the nuns in first grade taught me the power of prayer. Now, and also, I'll digress on that a little bit. I had a father who drank all the time. Nice guy, would never beat me, never anything like that. But he never took me to a ball game. He never played sports with me. He had a master alcohol. He was a beer drinker, and he loved beer, and he'd be in the bars every night. So he wasn't like a father that you would later on say, gee, I wish we had a closer relationship. The nuns taught us in first grade that you had a father in heaven. And that I thought, wow, you know, I was in first grade, a father in heaven. So, you know, I used to pray to that father all the time because that would become my father. So my whole life, I believed in the power of prayer. The first time that Tim Reed and I went on stage, I was wandering aimlessly. I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. And I kept praying. I said, God, there must be, what am I supposed to be doing? I'd be in a bar at 2:00 in the morning and you know, with all my buddies. And I'd say, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belong. So I used to pray, say, God, show me the way. The first time I went on stage with Tim Reed and something I had written got a laugh, it was like a B movie where the dark clouds open up and the sun burst through and my whole being went, oh, yeah. Oh, this is what I want to do. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Oh, I couldn't sleep that whole night. It was a Friday night. I couldn't sleep the whole night. I got up in the morning, Saturday morning. I went down to the church where I had been an altar boy, where I went to mass on Sundays, and there was no service. It was an empty church. I got down, I prayed. I said, God, I know now what I want. I want to be a stand-up comedian. If you let me make my living as a stand-up comedian, I'll do charities. I promise God I'll give it back. But I now know what I want. I want to be a stand-up comedian. Now, that was 50 years ago. That was September 1969. Now, all my prayers have been answered. I've had a marvelous career, as my book states. It's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of struggles, but I had a wonderful career. So God answered my prayers, and I kept my end of it. He kept his end of it. Now, 50 years later, in September 2019, I went back to that church, and on a Sunday, I gave the sermon on the power of prayer. Wow. And I told that congregation, I knelt over there 50 years ago, and I prayed for everything that came into my life, and it's all coming out. But I say, here's the power of prayer. And it's not rocket science. It made a lot of sense to me. I said to the congregation, have any of you out there, how many of you out there have ever thought of somebody you hadn't seen in a long time, and the phone rings and it's that person? Or maybe you thought about somebody you hadn't seen in a long time, a schoolmate, you're walking down the street where you haven't seen them in years, and you walk and you bump into that person. You say, I was just thinking about you. How many of that happened? And the whole congregation raised their hands. I said, if human beings can transfer thought, and obviously we can, then how much could a supreme being hear our thoughts? It's not rocket science to me. That's the power of prayer. I really believe in it. You know.
Wow. Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and I want everybody to pick up your book. It's available at tomdreesen.com and Amazon. Still Standing, My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. Tom Dreesen, this is a fantastic book. I could not put it down once I started reading it. It's absolutely unbelievable. Thank you, Tom, so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the plugs and everything. It was really fun being with you guys. I hope that we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely, Tom. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Take care. That was a great time with Tom.
A great show.
Thank you so much. It was fun. Tom is such a great guy. I'm so happy he came on the show. Really great guy and so many great stories. I mean, I mean, you could sit here all night and listen to great stories about Frank Sinatra. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. I just want to do some shout outs. Flora in Brooklyn. Hello. Thank you so much for checking in with us. Tom, thanks so much for the questions. Right.
Maureen, our friend, she's also was watching.
Hey, Maureen, how you doing? How are you?
Jim Rose.
And Rose, also Joanne in Canarsie, and Cindy in Lake Ronkonkoma. And just let me do this real quick before we roll out, Doc G. The St. Francis Community of Faith in Plainview, New York, has opened a food pantry. Now, anyone in need of food should contact my friend. His name is Pastor Ken Corbin, and his number is 631-418-4308. Or if you can actually go to the community project page at cfatli.net and complete the form indicating how many people you have in your family. It's the St. Francis Community of Faith, the food pantry, and it's Pastor Ken Corbin. So check that out. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Coming back on Thursday, we have a special show at 5 o'clock. Frank Stallone's going to be here hanging out with us.
Another awesome show. I can't wait.
Right. And then on Monday, we have a show, but it's going to be a little bit earlier than usual. It's going to be from 3 o'clock till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Loretta Swit from MASH, Margaret Houlihan's going to be here hanging out with us. So we have so many great shows coming up. I'm so excited about that. And thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're killing it. You're killing it, Jimmy. And I just want to let you know about the Roku. We were live on a Roku channel. It started getting hung up, so I had to take us off. But at least we know it works.
Awesome.
So we're going to be working on that. We're going to be trying to get that honed a little bit. People, for you watching the Roku, thank you for watching it. And this will be up there on the Roku channel very soon. So thank you all for watching. And, you know, if you want to email me anytime at paypal.com, admin@hamiltonradio.net, and I take donations. We're doing a Mega Millions thing. That's $10 a week or $10 a month. I can get into that sometime. And we're doing a financially fit program, which is an amazing program. So you guys can email me about all this stuff, and then we'll talk about it off the air if you want, or you can ask me on Facebook or however you want to do it. But thanks, Jimmy. It was nice talking to you.
It was great talking to you too, Doc G. We'll catch you on Thursday.
And don't forget Rock Ribs and Ridges. We're going to be.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be in June, right?
That's June 25th, 26th, 27th. Right. If COVID, everybody goes back to normal.
That's up in Sussex County, my old radio stomping grounds. I was on the air up there for about 5 years, so I'll be looking forward to go hanging out back up there again.
Exactly. So goodbye, everybody. We got a lot of great stuff happening for you. My friend, of course, Gator from David Broadhurst, my friend Gator from the We the People Radio. I give him a shout out because he was watching us earlier, and he's the one hosting that event. So I got to give him a shout out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gator. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Have a great night. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.